welcome to Altacast number 20 or 21.
I think it's like 21.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. 20 or 21. Today, I'm joined with Sol from the Discord. As you may know, this is your first appearance to the community.
It is, yes. Hello, I exist. I'm a real person.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the combat trials that Sol and I have been working on, and kind of elaborate a bit on what that is, its place in the game, the kinds of things you can expect from it, and I guess we'll be both I guess giving you a bit of a vision onto the future of these types of things in the game. That'll be more clear once we start to get into it. First and foremost, though, update on what the team's doing. Optimization team is doing optimization stuff, so nothing really evolving there. That's Victor, Serena, and Ivy at this point. Tiana and Sebastian, however, are working on the cosmetics for the current Halloween season. So there's some really extreme outfits being worked on that I think people will enjoy. Something I should mention is that right now we're kind of planning to do 3 rotations for Halloween. So if you, because there's so many cosmetics, it kind of caught us by surprise that we'd have so many. So there's gonna be another rotation after the next one. So there's 2 more rotations coming for Halloween, I think. So when the next rotation comes, if you don't see your outfit from last year come back, don't worry, it will probably come back in the rotation after that. In the future, we'll probably just have more cosmetics per rotation for these kinds of seasons where there's tons of stuff that has to return. But for this period, because we haven't touched the launcher too much, we're doing a 3rd rotation. Joel's working on housing, as everybody may know. He's doing lots of R&D stuff, so fairly top secret, because if it doesn't pan out, we don't want to let people down based on what stuff is being worked on in R&D. It's very interesting stuff.
Fingers crossed, though. I hope it works.
Let's hope it all works. And Timo's still kind of away doing some dealing with some personal stuff. Nothing overly serious. It's just stuff that if he wants to disclose, he can do it. And that just leaves, Timo's doing business stuff, and then that leaves you and me who are doing combat trial stuff.
Yeah.
Did I forget anybody? No, that's everyone.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that's a pretty good time. 3 minutes 20 before, after being done with the introduction of what everybody's doing.
Amazing.
So combat
Not sure
trials.
if that's a new record. Yeah, combat trial.
Usually we're around 5 minutes.
For a while.
Okay. What about combat trials, Sol?
I mean, the combat trials is something that I think we've missed for a while. Like, Township has a lot to offer, and the combat experience is something that I've wanted to expand upon for a really long time. On top of that, progression is something that I feel like needed to be looked at a little bit. We saw a lot of players just rushing down into the mines because that was the only original form of progression that we had, and just like sprinting past everything and like mining out mithril and things like that, like really often. And then it would flood the market on the public servers, and then on private servers even, it would just end up like you would get to the very end of progression really, really quickly. And I didn't really like seeing that very much. And then as a player experiencing that, it felt a little bit too easy to get there. So I wanted to put some progression barriers in the way of players, which is where these combat trials sort of took shape, was combining those two things.
Yeah. So combat trials are coming into the right now we're trying to get them working into the caves. That's the the next major technical aspect of them is to get them implemented in the caves, which means that we are revisiting caves. So I know after the forest came out, people wanted to know what the future of caves were, and we're starting to dabble back into it. They definitely deserve more attention, and we're on our way there. So we have 3 main trials that are going to come out with this combat trials update. It's not coming next update, probably not, but maybe the one after. We're aiming for before the end of the year for sure, which would sound like a long time away, but it's actually not. We have like
not in game development time. That's not very long.
There's like it's a month and a half before like the Christmas break, so month and a half to 2 months. So it's coming by quick, but we're gonna try and get it out before then. 3 main trials. They're generally designed a bit for earlier players, like as Sol mentioned. So if you're already kitted out with like the max, with like the toughest alloys, with like maxed out on heart flowers, these are going to be easier by a pretty fair margin.
Since it's supposed to be a progression gate, really, if you're already past that gate because of the way our current progression works, you're going to find that some of the challenge is going to be lost. Like, I mean, if you have some of the highest tier alloys right now and you just walk up to a worm, you'll cough in its general direction and it will just cease to exist. And so in a similar manner, like we wanted to tune these trials so that there's differing levels of difficulty. So like the 3rd trial is going to be challenging. It'll be less challenging if you're already at the highest tier, but it's balanced for higher tier metals anyway. So you should hopefully, even if you are at the highest level, find some challenge within these trials, and hopefully it'll be a pretty fun experience to go and experience with you and your group.
Yeah. So there's definitely there's definitely a multiplayer component to the to the trials. You can't do them alone. We've kind of both been working at them alone as we're testing, and they're a good enough challenge on your own. Like you have to kind of be on your feet, I think, if you want to try and solo it. I was doing one of the trials and I was kind of like fighting a bit passively, just kind of like going in for hits and using locomotion to dodge most of the stuff. And I found it harder to do that than like trying to move a bit more in the room as I'm like dodging stuff. And at the same time, that was more fun to fight that way. So hopefully people will get a bit of a kick out of the more structured experience that the trials are. I guess that's one of the key differences between the combat trials here compared to other ones, is that there's going to be a bit of there's more structure to the encounter that you're dealing with. Like there's specific enemy locations and a particular level layout that you're dealing with that's been custom designed by us. And then like obviously with any kind of multiplayer, like a trial, it gets easier it theoretically gets easier the more people you have. Like maybe there's a point where like there's too many of you that like things are too chaotic, but generally speaking, you've got more swords on the field.
Yeah, you might end up with each other in the crossfire if you bring too much of yourselves, though. If you have your highest tier alloy sword, you accidentally hit your buddy, you might be going back to the surface.
Yeah, you've got to watch out for danger close a little bit. So as far as enemies go, we're currently going to be using existing enemies for the trials. There was a bit of a decision we made when we started the art for the trials, and when we were talking about the experience of them, that we could kind of make it trying to fit the mobs that we're using in this first iteration, but it'd be a bit of a waste of like our art resources to try and do something that we want to change later, because thematically it'll make more sense. So we just decided to let's do the environment for what we want it to be in the future, and then eventually we'll replace the enemies that are inside it. So if you're hoping for new enemies.
Yeah, that being said, the trials in terms of difficulty are being designed with the current enemies in mind. So like we're not really skimping on that part at least.
For intents and purposes, they were designed with these the current enemies we have to make sure that the experience is actually good for those enemies. But when it comes to the thematic dressing of it, we've catered it towards where we want it to be in the future. And I think that'll be exciting for players to see because it's a kind of a new concept that they maybe have not thought about too much.
It looks great. Like I'm really excited, honestly.
Yeah, it's looking like I was unsure how well I could pull off the look, but it's coming along pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to have supporters look forward to some spoilers in the near future because I'm chomping at the bit to share some screenshots.
I added some. I don't know if you looked at the first trial since the work I did yesterday, but there's some.
I saw your comment on plastic. I haven't actually seen it yet, but I do want to take a look at that.
There's a bit more of a mood being built now in the first trial.
Cool.
So I guess we can shed a bit of light on it. So so when you enter the trial, you enter the main chamber that the whole thing takes place, and then you perform an interaction to activate the trial, and that's where everything kind of kicks off. And during this period, and once it's activated, you're in there until you've completed everything and you killed everything, or until everybody's dead. And if everybody dies, then there's a total wipe. The whole thing restarts.
Yeah, you will be able to walk in and retrieve your stuff without having to reactivate the trial for some of them.
Yeah.
I think for
the third one.
Yeah, not the last one. The last one you have to kind of go all in for if you want to get your stuff back. But yeah, I'm curious about how this is going to end up working because if it pans out the way that I want it to, it's going to be a really interesting visual storytelling thing where if you're not the first people coming through this trial, you're gonna open the door of this trial and there'll be arrows strewn throughout the wall from previous people fighting, maybe a wooden bag or two for some stragglers who didn't know what they were getting themselves into.
A lot of in games, whenever you come across these temple ruins and you see everything being damaged, and you see broken swords and stuff like that on the floor, and there's usually just set dressing, but here it'll actually be the remains of previous players who have given up on trying to get their gear back, or it wasn't worth picking up on the second one through.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how it populates this area after people have tried it a bunch and failed and lost their stuff.
Yep. Do we want to talk about rewards?
Yeah. So I think I guess let's reveal what the reward of the trial is, because I think that's what people are curious about, is what's the purpose of it.
Right. Okay. So the main progression block that we're going to be adding is smelter unlocks. Right now, the smelter has the ability to craft absolutely everything from the very beginning, including unique alloys and mithril and highest tier stuff. As long as you have the ore and you have the material, you can just craft it, and that's it. This created sort of difficult progression where the second that you got iron, if you knew about red iron, iron's worthless to you other than a construction material, because red iron is just objectively better in terms of the stats and stuff unless you wanted the iron aesthetic. So to start, once these updates roll out, the smelter is only going to be able to craft copper, iron, and gold, and that's it. You're going to have to unlock the other ability to craft these additional alloys and basic ingots and stuff by completing these trials and obtaining the treasure at the end. Do you want me to like go into specifics of what that's going to be aesthetically, or do you want to keep that a surprise?
We'll keep it a little bit of a surprise. Like we can talk about the mechanics of the trials, but let's. I want people to see the place for themselves and have their minds blown a bit by what they're seeing.
Yeah. The other reward that we're putting in as well, because like obviously once a server has cleared this trial for the first time, like you have that unlock for the smelter. It's not going to be a consumable, so it's going to be a permanent unlock. So there should be a reason for people to want to go and re-challenge to this. So we're adding a more consistent way to increase your max HP. At the end of these trials, each player is going to be able to increase their max HP by a certain number that will balance. That's probably going to be like 1 to 2 heart flowers. I think right now I have it set to 2.
Yep.
Per trial. And it's going to be a personal upgrade in there, meaning that everyone who's cleared this trial and has touched this pedestal is going to get that upgrade for themselves. So if you personally have cleared this trial, you get that. So it's sort of everyone's going to want to clear these trials at some point for that guaranteed max HP upgrade, in addition to just item rewards as well, which is still, we're still hashing out exactly how we want to handle those. But the HP thing is definitely going to be in there.
Yeah, we like the HP thing it was one of the main rewards that we wanted to go with because we can control it per player. We don't really want someone who has like the max out gear to just farm the same trial over and over again to get loot. It's not really a scalable way to have people collect stuff, to kind of create this preset challenge that maybe they found like the perfect strategy for. It's not the way we want people to collect materials.
The enemies, the stuff that we're using for the trials will specifically not be dropping anything.
Yeah.
So even if they're already standard enemies that you're used to seeing certain drops from, you will not get anything. They're entirely there for the combat challenge, not for people to farm.
Yeah. So the matter of whether or not they'll be giving experience is another thing up to debate, I guess, a little bit with how, like, can I farm it to get combat XP? And that's something that maybe that we're probably going to be more lenient with compared to item rewards.
Yeah.
Because there's tons of ways to get combat XP, so us letting people get combat XP from this is not such a big deal.
And I don't want to like. If we do anything, I would be very surprised if we ended up settling on making it no XP. If we did want to restrict it at all, it would probably just be reduced just because of the sheer amount of XP that you can get within this area.
Yeah.
But like it is a combat trial, and it should be something that you get experience for. We just don't want it to turn into like an easy farm is all.
Yeah. So that okay. So we talked a bit about the rewards, talked a bit about the experience of it. What kind of time frame do you think it takes for people to do the trials? So that they get a figure of the how much
time. It depends on which trial you're doing. If it is the first or second, like they increase in time required for each trial. The first trial, I would probably say you can clear within 10 minutes, pretty handedly. Either that or you're going to be dead within 10 minutes. One of the two. Second trial, probably a similar time frame, maybe closer to 15. The third trial, an hour.
Yeah, the third trial there's a big jump between the second and third trial when it comes to experience. Yeah. So, I guess if you're watching this and you're be prepared for like a different experience when you go from the second to third.
Yeah, like the third one has quite a lot involved with it. The first and second one are kind of straightforward, and then the third one is more of a, I guess, preview of what we want some future procedurally generated content to be like.
Yeah. So for the third one, the criteria for building it was pretty much, let's just do the whatever we want. Use whatever mechanics we've come up with, whatever logic stuff we've got. Let's just try and use it and make something cool and interesting without um, holding back too much, because we know that it's that the future of these types of things is going to be procedural. So as Sol mentioned, we're doing these for smelter upgrades. In the future, we might have it for maybe other professions that require a similar type of trial. Maybe it's not so combat related. Maybe it's going to be more puzzle oriented or other things, but it's going to require some kind of progression block. The reason why we're settling on that, because I know it's going to be a divisive kind of thing for people, is that before to get for you to get the highest alloy, there was no guaranteed challenge that you had to go through. Like the only guaranteed thing is that you had to wander deep into the caves and get the stuff you wanted.
Hope the cave layer loads. That was the challenge.
Yeah. Like whether or not there was any kind of like enemies you had to fight, or there were like dangerous experiences you had along the way, those are completely unsure because of the procedural nature of the caves and the way that they're and the way that everything is somewhat accessible without any precedent. So setting these kinds of precedents is going to help, I guess, give the game a bit more flow. It'll kind of let us make sure that you've that at least somebody on your server has gone through the trouble of doing these of solving these problems. Part of the currently, as we're trying to implement those trials in the caves, we're planning on making them so that defeating the trial for the first time will also unlock access to the next layer. So that's going to be another component that helps us make sure that you do them in the order that we want you to, so that you don't just skip straight to the last one. We had different ideas for this mechanic, kind of like a key and door type of thing, but this seems to be like the cleanest way to kind of string them together one after the other. And some of the technology required to do that is going to be very valuable to the caves, I think. Pretty much what we're planning on doing is having a method of inserting a custom-made layer at any point we want in the caves, with a predefined entry and predefined exit. Having this kind of control means that we can, right now we're inserting trials, but maybe we'll want to insert something else. Maybe there's going to be a particular layer that's just this kind of puzzle contraption that is required for you to progress down, and maybe it's not so it's not such a combat heavy thing. It's just a machine that you have to interact with, and we can really control the way it behaves with the cave exits.
Yeah, and then speaking of the puzzle-like stuff within there, one thing I want to mention about the combat trials that we have is it's not going to be just walk in and hit things with your weapons until they fall down. Like we're designing the areas, the arenas, and stuff that you have to interact with within these trials to be more interesting than that. So there'll be environmental aspects that we're going to need to interact with or want to interact with. Can I give some examples about the one that we're currently working on?
Yep, sure.
Okay. So as an example, on one of them that we have, at the entryway, there's two sliding gates. One's going to be open, and if you open one, it's going to close the other one. And you can use this strategically to cut off advances of some of the enemies, where like if you pull the lever and like duck under the gate, it'll cut off the enemies that are chasing you, and they'll have to go back around to get you. But it'll also open up the gate if there are any enemies waiting on the other side. So there's going to be stuff like that within pretty much all the combat trials, and they're going to get increasing in complexity as you advance through the trials.
Yeah, the trials are a good exploration of what dungeons can be for the Township Tale. The third trial we've been calling the mini dungeon because of its complexity. So when you see it, don't think that that's what old dungeons are going to look like. Like we've got a lot crazier ideas that we're going to explore with full-fledged dungeons. And as Sol mentioned earlier, this is going to be it's a good test of how we want to procedurally build these in the future. something that we've always tried to balance between procedural and handmade stuff is that we want the procedural stuff to feel like it's almost handmade, to feel like it's quite carefully crafted and it's got some sense of flow, and that we have the right control over the scaling of difficulty across areas, or for a dungeon case, it'd be chambers. And this will really let you replay it over and over again. Because the plan is for future dungeons is not that they're procedural once, but that they can be kind of reset, I guess, in a way, via mechanics. So you can reshuffle the dungeon and replay it. Increase the difficulty of the dungeon. It's going to introduce a lot of like the manifestation of a lot of meta mechanics, like in games where, you know, maybe you've got like this magic resource that you use to fuel up the dungeon, and that increases the prosperity of the dungeon, but as well as the difficulty. And that's going to lead well into what the end game of A Township Tale is going to be, where there's lots of this, like, you know, if you're like a min-maxing type of player, you're going to be going for like upgrade level like 245 of like a dungeon, and things are just insane in there. So that's kind of where procedural is going to play a role into it.
And we also want to make sure that when we do procedural stuff, it doesn't feel too repetitive, which is where the challenge for us is going to end up being, because like we've all played those games where like it has like these procedurally generated dungeon, and then you like walk into the library room and you're like, I know exactly what this room is. Yeah. Like the hidden treasure is right here, and like this room will exit into either here or here, and then boom, bam, how it's no longer interesting or novel to explore those rooms. And you know, if you play enough, there's going to be a certain amount of that, but our goal is to minimize that as much as we can to make it a interesting experience no matter what.
Yeah, like we're going to be looking at various levels of procedural where it's not just like we made the library room and like all of its contents is like we have this large room, we're going to theme it to be a library, and it's going to arrange bookshelves in a procedural way. Exits, entrances, and like secret passageways around it and through it are going to be ideally procedurally generated as well, as well as like any kind of interior puzzle within that room. That's a lot of like logical design that we haven't started yet, so don't get your hopes up too much. But in terms of how to structure so that a puzzle can be fun, and that the computer didn't just create like, hey, there's a lever in this box and it opens a door somewhere in this dungeon. Like we want to avoid like too much of a disconnect with the between inputs and outputs. So that's going to be the challenge with us creating dungeons. On top of that, there was a thing that we're not going to go into too much, but we'll tease it a little bit, that Sol was starting to look into before we started shipping trials. And that's going to really change up how dungeons, enemies, and like content of A Township Tale is going to develop.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, so rest assured that, you know, despite housing being in the works, we still have a pretty big focus on adventure, because we know that like it's kind of the holdback for a lot of the like interesting, valuable content in the game. We don't want to create more alloys because they're just going to increase damage, and it's just like flat combat damage. We're going back to this concept of variety and specialization, and we're going to be enforcing that stronger and stronger as we approach like the mid to end game of A Township Tale. Yeah. All right. That's about. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? Like, we can go a bit over if there's stuff you want to cover about the trials.
I think I covered most of what I wanted to about the trials. We might add in the mini dungeon a reward for those who have completed the climbing challenge. Where there might be some things for you to find within the dungeon that only someone with climbing can.
Yeah.
And then past that, like Boramy mentioned, these trials, it would behoove you to bring friends. because you may outside of the difficulty, there may be certain aspects of it that would require more than one person if you want to get all the treasure.
Yeah. What kind of build diversity do you think would be valuable for the trials?
Honestly, like your holy trinity of tank, damage dealer, and well, I guess ranger in our case rather than healer, because we don't really have that.
You can sling healing pods at people.
I mean, it's true, but it's not really that renewable of a resource that you can get a whole lot of quite yet. But I would definitely say a ranged person would be helpful, and then someone who's good with the shields would probably also be helpful. And then past that, just rules of any combat apply. The faster you can thin the horde, the easier time you're gonna have.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking forward to seeing some of the chaos ensue in the trials. I'll be sure to watch anybody who's going to be live streaming them to see what goes down.
I'm there as well. I'm so ready to watch people try to run their way through them.
Yeah.
Like I think especially some of the later ones are going to be pretty tense, and I am excited to see that.
Yeah. Like I remember my first time going through the third trial, and that was good fun.
That was fun. How long did that one room take you?
Too long. I don't know, but like I know that I wasn't doing it effectively, and that I was just kind of flailing about in this room trying to figure out, like trying to turn on my brain a little bit.
I felt it. I could see the smoke coming out of your ears.
I was in like survival mode and not in like logical mindset mode.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm very excited to see how that stuff goes, because like even though I designed all of the like spawns and the balance between the enemies and stuff like that within these trials, like trying to clear these by myself is still hard, despite the fact that like I know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's like I will win probably like 70% of the time, and it's exciting. I like that, honestly. Makes it hard to test, but like I think that bodes well for those who are looking for more of a challenge, at least in the later ones.
Yeah, I can say that because we designed the levels pretty cleanly, so there isn't like stuff that might obstruct the AIs kind of unknowingly. Like it definitely feels like I've got to be a little bit more active about how I'm fighting compared to like fighting in the overworld. I've got a bit less room to move around. I've got to be careful of like the passages around me in case something comes up from there, and like it just feels more of like active fighting, which I think is really enjoyable.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot, and it's gonna be a less hit, step back 1 second, wait for him to finish swinging, repeat process.
Yeah.
Than you're used to.
Yeah. So obviously because we have, like we said, that we're bringing existing enemies, so Turabata is going to play a role of it. And part of the reason why they move now when they attack is because we wanted them to have that level of aggression in the trials, and we'll release that beforehand because why not? It's not an exclusive change to the trials that we want, and that way people can get used to what it means to fight them and then be more ready for the trials.
We'll see.
Yeah, like some other changes that I'd like to pull from the trial branch. Maybe it'll come in next update, because they add a lot of feel to the enemy. Like basically, I added sounds for the worm spit impact. We've always had sound sets ready for them, but they weren't hooked up properly. So I've added that, and I've increased the volume of it because they were too quiet. So now, like, things should feel a bit more like hectic, from a sensory perspective.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
One last thing I do want to mention before we go, the rewards that we get in addition to unlocking We've supported some additional bonuses and stuff that they can provide. So, as an example, right now it provides a smelting speed bonus. So when you have obtained all of these things, the smelter is going to operate at about, I think, 2 or 3 times what the current speed is. It still consumes the same amount of fuel and stuff. It's just this kind of a quality of life faster thing. But the framework of the system allows us to support other kinds of upgrades like fuel efficiency or like chance to not consume materials or things of that nature that we could set up for potential future stuff as well that I think would be really cool to be able to customize your smelter experience in the future, and I mean in the future, for other stuff that you could possibly find where you can like maybe find a particular kind of upgrade that you can slot in because like, oh, I don't need to make this thing, so instead I'll just slot in something that like gives me a reduced chance to consume materials and things like that. So
yeah,
I'm excited about that as well. So also for those who like to mass produce a lot of materials and stuff, your life's going to be a little bit easier if you go out and collect these.
Yeah. From a visual perspective, in this first version, the smelter's not going to overly change too much visually, because there's a bit of a rework kind of pending when housing gets released, because we're going to try and build the buildings in town using the house building system, just because we don't want 2 separate versions of houses to exist. But yeah, like I think these types of major upgrades are gonna really play a part in shaping the town, and how that'll manifest itself, you'll have to wait for housing. All right. Well, thanks for watching the first part of the Altacast. Thanks, Sol, for joining me in this episode and shedding some light on the combat trials that you've been working on.
Anytime.
I'm going to be doing the Q&A with Joel in just a second. He'll be able to answer more of the curveball questions that we usually get. And all right, see you just in a bit.
See ya.
All right, hello and welcome back. I've swapped places. I'm on the other side of the Altacast now, and I'm out of focus. But welcome to the Q&A. I'm here with Pixelated Joel.
Oh, am I pixelated?
Yeah, that's just my internet. It's probably not you.
Oh, are you kidding? Am I pixelated?
So yeah, we're here to answer some of your questions. I forgot to put the Q&A link in the last Altacast again. So we've quickly gone and asked people to ask us questions in supporter chat, and they've graciously done so. So we are ready to begin. All right. I'll let you answer a fair amount because people had to listen to me all of last Altacast. So you can kick us off.
All right. Question number 1. With 3 upvotes is what happens if you try to smelt a Tarabara? Now, fortunately, Boramy has said that I'm answering this question. So, well, once we once our smelting system is completed, there's going to be a giant smelter somewhere where it's like a volcano, where you lead the Tarabatas up to the top of the volcano and you knock them in, and then out the bottom of the volcano you get like a smooth river of molten whatever went into the volcano. So that's how you get your mithril river. That's going to run straight down the center of town, and then there's going to be waves, and you can surf on them.
Yeah, it's all true.
To seriously answer the question, I think it would be cool if there's some sort of quirky interactions like that in the future, but that's the sort of thing that's so niche that it's just not necessarily worth us thinking about at this stage. Like, it's pretty straightforward. If you kill them, you get ores and you can smelt them. But
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows what
Something that might come through is Turbobatters might have some kind of reaction to elemental attacks. That's probably the closest thing to smelting a Turbobatter that you'll get in the relative near future compared to putting a Turbobatter in the smelter. So yeah, there's a whole aspect of the township tale, like Joel and I talked about in the future of difficulty Altacast, where variance in how you deal with enemies is gonna increase, and that might play a role with elements. Yeah.
Are we going to be fighting molten Tarabatas?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, question number 2. Wait, how do I mark these as... Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Okay. Question number 2. How are you today?
I am doing just fine. Same as all the other days. I'm here I'm in quarantine. I've returned from the US. And anybody coming to Australia from overseas has to be in forced quarantine. So I'm at a hotel.
I just saw your paper bag person in the background.
Yeah. Meet Francis.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
he's just he's checking my emails for me.
Boramy is so lonely. Okay, I'm good. I've been helping out Eric and Sol and Boramy a bit with some of the trial stuff, trying to work out how to get it to exist.
We said what we're trying to get them to, so you can say that you're trying to get them in the caves.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to get them in the caves.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
A bit of detail about that, because people like details, is originally our design was on a cave layer. You might have like a tunnel that goes out to the side, and then at the end of the tunnel, it turns into, this trial dungeon, whatever. That might be something we experiment more with in the future, but for now, instead, I've decided to take on a different approach, which has very different pros and cons. I'd say the most obvious con is it's less subtle. Like, you just come across it. You're going downstairs and you're like, crap, this is a dungeon now. Whereas the other one would have been, unless you search this layer and find this tunnel, you might not have noticed it. So there's that con, but the pro is it's theoretically a fair bit more flexible if we do want to have entirely different sort of layer types that aren't caves in the future. But it's all a little bit experimental still as well. It's a bit of a break from house building, which is also nice and not nice at the same time. But yeah, so I'm trying to line things up and see how it. But yeah, my day's been good. To answer that question, what year is the current game set in?
It's I feel like I remember answering a question like this like ages ago, and we said something like it's the year.
We just made up a number because it's not based.
It's really not relevant. Yeah.
In our universe, and therefore
it's the year 57,892.
It's the year. It's the year 5,614 BL. We don't know what L is. We just know we're before it.
Yeah. No, it's not too relevant. If you want to place it in terms of like historic stuff, it's a medieval game with some Victorian steampunkish vibes, I guess, a little bit, with all the machinery that the game has. That's about it. There's no date.
Okay, I have been asked, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow.
That's a bird.
And it's about 24 miles per hour or 11 meters per second.
Yeah. We just help someone with their geography homework.
How's Francis doing in quarantine?
He's doing all right. He's put on a bit of weight.
How do other people know about this?
Because I was streaming it a while ago, when I first showed up to the hotel.
This one's my favorite question, personally. Why do you keep forgetting to put the link to the Q&A, Boramy?
I don't know, because I set up a default description, and I think it's just made me forget to add the link.
Is that the default for every video, or?
Yeah, all the links and stuff like that. I don't rewrite that. There's a template that every video we upload adds that, and I think it makes me feel like it's complete. Huh?
You should just add it to the default template.
Yeah, maybe I should. It doesn't matter, I guess, if our gameplay videos have it. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, you can remove it from them, and it's probably less work. So.
Yeah.
Oh, bloody hell! Questions are because these have no upvotes. The questions are changing also.
Yeah.
How much wood? You screwed up the question. Whoever wrote this, you wrote, how much wood wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck chucked woodchuck wood at a woodchuck wood woodchuck wood? There's a good video I watched the other day which asked how much wood should a woodchuck chuck. Anyway, we've done that one. Explain. Oh, okay, this is science with Boramy. Explain how Valiant is so heavy when Mithril and Silver aren't as heavy. Where are the equations, Boramy?
Well, pretty much when you combine Mithril and Silver, they have a chemical reaction that creates some heavy oxidization that causes the air particles to adhere and crystallize around the Valiant that increases its mass.
Okay, so to sum that up for layman's, the coal that you put into the smelter, as well as the oxygen in the air, bind with it to create a larger mass.
Yeah. That's a real scientific thing. It's not like I'm making it up.
We actually got Valiant and tested this guy.
Also, because it's a game.
Because numbers. Can we get reverb in the caves, please? That would be neat. Perhaps distortion at longer ranges. That's something I have experimented with. This comes back to our long-term goals of adding WWI's support, which is an audio engine, into the game.
Project. Yep.
And it's a kind of cool thing to explain what it is. It's it's software that is in the game. It's not a separate program, but it's its own bundle that can take events from the game and information from the game, and it does all the sound processing. So the game itself actually doesn't do sounds. It's all information sent to this library which does sound magic. And it's compared to Unity, it's mind-blowingly fantastic.
It supports dynamic grays of stuff. So pulling back a bow would it can handle the distortion of sound of the string based off of how far you pull back. With Unity sounds, we can just we can play a sound when you've pulled back the bow.
And looping sounds are a little bit odd in Unity. Obviously, they're designed to support a little bit music looping or whatever, but it's not quite the same. And then there's cool things in the current game, we have what we call sound sets. So when you pick up an item, we pick a random sound from 6 sounds to play. But WWI supports not only sound sets, but then going for each of these sounds, we then want to tweak their pitch randomly up or down by a tiny percent, and we want to blah blah blah, like all these different modifiers.
Yeah.
So it lets things be a lot more kind of immersive and varied rather than.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be random necessarily. Like we can feed values into that factor. So, maybe like if your hand is moving fast when you're picking up something, it makes more noise. That's not something that we support out of the gate with Unity or with our games. So lots of interesting sound design coming with WYs, and reverb is one of them. And when Joel and I tested it was very cool to hear reverb.
There's a couple like asterisks on this. The first one is we have no clue when we're doing this because it's really a quality of life thing. The second double asterisk is it will be interesting to see if we can get working with voice chat because we got it working with voice chat before we moved to VBox, which is the voice engine we use now. The game became considerably less laggy when we moved to VBox, so we're not going back, but we're not positive that we'll be able to get reverb working with voices and VBox and WUIs.
Yeah, there's some stuff on how we can read stuff from VBox that make it a bit tricky to feed back into WIs.
But we'll find this stuff out over time. But yeah, like I am keen, but yeah, we'll see when. Another cooking question. What's your ideal system for a fully implemented cooking system? We only have basic roasting and stews at the moment, but it would be cool to have smoking, curing, fermenting. Smoking is bad for you.
Yeah. So most of the ideal systems for cooking would need to be more involved than kind of waiting for stuff. So things like smoking, curing, and fermenting, whilst they're kind of cool ideas, they're not a different interaction process. The first next thing we'll be looking to do with cooking is something that requires more attention and more active behavior, whether it's like flipping something or like spinning something. Yeah, just like the surfaces of cooking is probably going to be the next major cooking change.
Our game in general currently is still in a spot where there's not an output quality on items. I think when, and I presume we will, Boramy, correct me if I'm wrong, I presume we're going to start at some stage exploring the concept of output quality. Like you've done a good job cooking or you've done a good job blacksmithing, so you get a better result.
Currently we've always kind of have like a set output that's predefined. We need those to be more variable, that way we can create cooking systems or like other profession systems that reward you for your skill and demerit you for your lack of skill.
And those active things I think would very much tie into that. When you can spit roast something, and if you don't spin it at all, you'll burn it. But if you spin it crappily, you'll get it, but it might not be as nutritious or whatever. So cool. That one is done. Would you consider? In terms of total vision for cooking, I think this will evolve over time on a need basis. Like I could list off 100 different types of cooking that we could have in the game, but obviously development time still takes time. And I could list a million things that if we work on Township Tale for a million years would likely be in the game. But there's also a level of what's reasonably going to be in the game in the near future, and that's going to be much more need based. So yes, we might have ovens and we might have spit roasting and we might have smoking if we want to do that, or drying out, curing foods. Like these are all things we might have. And then obviously, as we mentioned, stuff like spit roasting is just significantly more likely to happen in the meaningful future. One for you, Boramy. How developed will the world's language be? Would we be able to talk in said language eventually?
I don't know if you'll be able to talk in the language. There is a bit of an overarching language for the game, and it helps us understand the culture of the world a bit better. It's an ancient language, so it's not being designed to be spoken. It's more designed to generate names for things.
It's a bit more barbaric or like caveman-esque. It's like it's like if I said to Boramy, "You cook today. Go cook." Like I mean that's English.
I mean, even then, it's not it's not designed to have like any kind of like subject verb object structure. It's really used to just generate nouns. So for the most, like maybe so the most you'll be able to maybe do is like learn how to call yourself names or give yourselves like titles based off of the language.
It's more of a descriptive thing. Like if I wanted to describe Boramy to someone, I'd say like big dumb or something, and then that would be that's the name. That's what we would ship. Here's the new creature. Like that's, and you can probably spend a bit of time trying to work out which creatures have followed this pattern and which haven't, because I'm not sure.
People know that Turabada is written in the language of the game.
So there's kind of this thing in the game, and I'll let Boramy go into more detail if and when he wants to, but some of these creatures have this old language name, and some of them have a more colloquial name, and it's quite possibly the case that the colloquially named ones might have an old language name, but it might be that they moved into the area or came into existence after that old language died out, and that's why they don't have that name. So,
like I mean, I guess people have been asking about it a lot, so I'll give it a little bit extra. But Turubadas are old language terms. Spriggles not, but Spriggles do have an ancient name that I've come up with somewhere in a document. So like they may so a lot of them will have both, especially things that are most things in the world have existed for a long time. So they're like we'll give them names because it's fun.
Shmichis are not.
Shmichis are not the old language names, no.
Goteras are.
Goteras are, yeah.
I'm not sure about other things.
Those are the only two in-game creatures.
Garabata and Gotera.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know what Tarabata means, but I know what Gotera means. So, anyway, can we get a small dock to hold items in our mouths at the expense of being muted or muffled beyond understanding?
Oh, is that for me?
I'm just laughing. Like, it's a kind of cool concept.
It's useful for it's useful for climbing, I think, is the best thing. Like you can put a dagger and then you're climbing up like the pirate sails, like a.
Yeah, except you're gonna accidentally break it out of your top it and then be like, Joel, fix the climb. On that note, I'm not sure how many of the more casual players who are generally the ones asking whether we're aware of climbing issues, but we are aware of climbing issues. I'm not sure if they're watching this, but in case you're wondering that, we're aware of climbing issues. I'll fix them one day. Stuff like throwing your bag off while climbing accidentally and grabbing bookcases. Anyway, Mount Dock is a bit of a weird one because it's kind of, I'm not sure what it adds. I would be curious to know what this adds necessarily, because a
belt dock is just as good, yeah.
I guess, like, obviously if you're used to walking around with your belt full and your bag full and everything's full but you still carry a knife around, and then you want to quickly do a two-handed action, you can just put your knife in your mouth and do your two-handed action, take your knife out again.
Yeah, because in real life, the reason why you do it is because, like, trying to put something in your pocket is difficult, or, like, people don't have, like, tool belts on them to put things in. So, like, having something accessible Yeah, I mean it crowds the character interaction space a lot. Have like more of these little dots we have, so it's part of the reason why we don't have anything on your chest, for example. It's because we don't. Yeah.
We did not enjoy like the start of VR. Every game was just having like docs on your chest. It was just always grabbing stuff off your
and
chest.
like you can't see through. Like yeah, it's like lots of UI layers that are outside of your vision because you're trying to look through things to get to things.
But I think the other thing is to make it look okay, it would have to be fairly restrictive as to the size of what you can dock there. And then the reality is you probably end up in a situation where it's like you can't even dock like a medium rod axe, for instance, because it's realistically too heavy for your mouth and probably too large to look okay there. And then you get stuck in a situation where it's like, wow, there's like a whole 4 items in the game that we can actually use this mechanic with.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I love these ideas. They're kind of things where it's like rethinking the character in its structure. But this one gets a no from me. Would you
popping off with the questions?
Would you consider making a role to ping supporters when we want to notify them about things like Boramy forgetting questions and us needing questions?
We could use the follower role inside of the supporter channels to do that if we wanted to.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I have kind of mixed feelings. There's a thing with pings where it's like, even if you want to know about something, there can be a point where it's like, especially if it's short-term things like this, having a notification for it when you just gone to bed just means you now have a useless notification in the morning. Whereas announcements like an update coming out is still applicable to people for the next 24 hours. So, but yeah, I'm not sure. We're always trying to find ways to better like communicate and engage. So it is something that we could look into if a lot of people really want it. But
yeah, immediate things like this, where we're like anybody who's immediately there, like we'll try not to ping people for that.
Yeah. Question about craftable armor. Will there be benefits besides protection?
Like pockets or something similar? Probably not pockets. So no. There's lots of room for combat-related things to take apart with armor. It's just a matter of us implementing it and experimenting with things. We have lots of ideas on what we can do with armor besides protection. I don't want to go too much into it because it's not something that I've thoroughly discussed with Joel, so I don't want to throw him under the bus here.
Here's one. If you ever find yourself walking too fast, just throw on some iron.
Yeah. So movement speed will be affected by armor, but only when it's worn, which so far is only going to be when you're in combat.
Yeah.
Like this, we're going to have a whole Altacast dedicated to armor when we get closer to it, to elaborate on these things. But there is going to be like we do have a way of how we're planning to mix cosmetics with armor, in the sense of like the cosmetics that you've bought for your clothes and the armor that you wear. Like how do we value both of them? Got a little visit from a cat.
She'll meow forever.
Yeah, Francis is the same. If I don't let him use the bathroom or something like that, he
puddle on the floor. Boramy pours out water each morning and 10 minutes later to mop it up.
What do you mean? He does things on his own. He's alive. He's a real person.
Yeah, I think
headphones.
I think armor is I agree. It's a whole topic in and of itself, but it's also something that personally I have very much like pushed away from my brain. Armor was probably one of the most internally debated concepts of all time in our development of A Township Tale, I'd say.
It was.
So there's a lot of not talking about it that's happened.
I mean, we had a big official meeting about it, and I think the decisions we made in that meeting are what we're sticking to because it took so much heated argument to get to that conclusion that we don't want to have whims affect the choices we made.
Yeah. So the end decision was along the lines of armor will exist in the game. It can't be shown all the time, otherwise it will undermine our cosmetic system, which is one of those difficult, tricky situations as developers where we got to balance, being a proper business, but also like the best design. And so we tried to work out how that would work well with the gameplay, and things like the downsides of weight might not apply until you're actually in combat and the armor activates itself. Stuff like that, and that's when your armor will appear, and you'll use the same fundamental system as the cosmetics, in that just like if you wear a hat or if you wear a jacket that might squish in your bow tie a bit or something, if you put on armor it might push in, so it kind of layers over the cosmetic system.
Yeah, but there's a chance you might have a jacket that's overly too big, and that will just get disabled to have the armor sit over it.
But yeah, the point is your basic cosmetics will still, like, it's not like all your cosmetics disappear just because you want your one armor glove appears. Like it still blends well with the system, and then from then on we're kind of accepting the fact that we all are pretty much on the same page as to what armor would do, in that it would provide, damage, defenses, maybe particular stat sort of defenses, like
in the first versions of armor we had like heat protection was one thing that leather did better than metal armor. And that sort of thing. And
then weight.
And weight, of course.
But anyway, that was a very in-depth armor answer. How many more do we want to do? Do we have
we are at the half-hour mark, so if there's fast ones you want to answer, or if they're there's a lot more questions here than we have time to answer now, which is good, I guess, because we have more stuff to answer next time.
Okay, I'll just skip through a couple then. Will it be possible to make houses out of entirely 100% one material, or will it require multiple materials?
I think you'll most likely need wood at the very least. Because the foundations will be made of wood. And so theoretically you can make an entirely wooden house. But I think you'll be able to make everything out of wood, and then one other material might be possible. I don't think you'll be able to make a house out of flint. So that one's not on our...
What type of interactions would be added to the game? I've noticed in a recent game I've played, that you can guess, that you could light wooden shields or barricades on fire. I mean, let's just focus on the fire question. I would love more dynamic fire systems. Like right now we have what we call heat points, I guess. and they can be on fire, and that's why campfires can be on fire, and because the heat point is the dried grass, and your player has a couple heat points on them, which you'll notice. Stick your hand in a fire, it catches on fire, and torches being an obvious one. But what we don't have is a system where like fire can go on anything and just kind of spread over things. I think it would be cool. I don't think it's necessary for the game though. So we'll see. It's probably something we'll do some R&D on.
Yeah, I mean the main concern, I guess, is like cost of performance cost of it, and the we'll have to do a lot of rebalancing for fire, particularly like if we can light all of your tools on fire, it should be easier to get them maybe, or harder to light them on fire. Like we don't want you spending ages making a shield and then like accidentally burn it down with your torch.
Let's do 2 more questions. This one's for moi. Can we have something in the launcher and in-game menu so that we can use a drop-down box and see who of your friends are online and which server they're on? These are the sorts of things that we do have planned for the launcher. Like the launcher, obviously, it doesn't take a genius to work out, general inspiration of outer launcher. Like it's not the first launcher. We'd love to have features like seeing your friends online, joining directly to the server your friends on, maybe stuff like that. The question is when the priority kind of kicks in for those sorts of features. Something I was talking to Timo about just today was mainly regarding the report system, but also potentially the friend system, is having a list of like recent players that you've interacted with or been nearby. Because we have a lot of people who are constantly going, I played with someone, they were really cool, but I forgot to add them as a friend, and I can't for the life of me like remember, their username. I guess if there's a list of 10 users, that doesn't really help. But like, if you kind of remember their username but not exactly, something like this would be pretty cool. So we do want to explore more features like that. No ETA. And I guess a final one for a game-related thing that applies to everyone. Do you want to pick one?
I'll answer the one that asks about my drawings. When are we expected to see new ores and enhanced caves, for example, from Boston's drawings? If you've watched the difficulty Altacast that Joel and I did, we talk about what's holding us back from kind of exploding on creating content for caves and for ores and crafting materials, is that we don't want to just keep going down this linear damage path. We want to open up into this branching parallel variance that the game and combat and enemies can have, so that you're kind of playing like the Pokemon style element, weakness versus strength kind of decision making, and that's what is going to drive a lot of the new areas and materials to come into the game. So we're waiting for that system to exist before we can add new ores and start to create really interesting caves. Yeah, and you can also find out more about that in the Alchemy Altacast that Joel and I did, where we talk about the effects of materials and stuff that you can get from exploring the world. All right, I think. Do you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say, a lot of this comes down to manpower as well, to some extent. Like, we've got a limited team size, and we obviously have big things that we have, like just literally in this question segment, we've talked about armor, we've talked about implementing
armor,
audio
housing,
system.
yeah, tons of stuff.
We've talked about like now new cave biomes. We're obviously working on house building. We're working on trials. Like there's so much planned that, and these things that are like our vision kind of what we should do next. Like we have these things and the overall vision doesn't tend to change, but our concept of what should be the next priority does kind of shift as we progress and explore the game ourselves. It's a bit hard to predict these sorts of things, especially when literally every single person looks like they're pretty much locked into their next 6 months of work. So,
yeah, it takes a bit of like individual experimentation to get some of the like a ball rolling on things that are not in the immediate roadmap that we've kind of spec'd out for the larger vision. So we'll get there though. Like we're learning to experiment more and more and getting better at kind of balancing the R&D with the game dev. Last year we didn't really do too much R&D, but this year I think we've internally been experimenting a lot more with stuff, and I think it's going to lead to some good things.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
And
that's it.
that's it.
Bye-bye, see ya. I'll be sure to add the link in the Altacast. We've got a lot more questions that supporters have asked that we haven't been able to answer because we're way over time. So we'll be sure to get to them. Thanks a lot for everything. And see you next time for Altacast 22. Bye-bye.